I do love a Founder Friday episode. It's not even Friday and we're doing it. That's how much I love it, right? So welcome to Rob Cossins. Thank you so much for making some time. For those people that don't know who are you, Rob, and what do you do?
Yeah, good morning. Great to be with you and just sort of sharing a bit about myself. So yeah, I'm Rob. I'm one of the co-founders of Scribe, and yeah, we do kind of insight on private companies, privately held data. So we work with all sorts of organizations. We help founders find angel investors with data. We help large banks to structure data about some of the private companies that they have exposure to. So yeah, all with that sort of analysis hat on of automating a lot of that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of what we do. We launched in 2020. We've raised a little bit of VC money, and now I think we work with, I think it should tick over about 600 companies, if not this week, next week, in terms of the number that we work with. So yeah, that's in a nutshell a little bit about us.
So you say Scribe, and sometimes I see Scribe Labs. What's the difference between the two? Help clear that one up for me.
Availability of domain names is the main reason between the two. I've got my eye on Scribe.ai, and we've made an offer, but not quite there yet, unfortunately.
Okay, you're not going with getscribe.com or something like that, right, John?
No, maybe we should, but no, not we. Yeah, the labs was sort of more of a legal thing.
So what's the origin story of all this, Rob? How did you find yourself motivated and compelled to make Scribe?
Yeah, so maybe just wind back a little bit. So when I left university, I went and did the thing that a lot of young kind of ambitious people want to do, and went straight into banking. So I studied economics, and I thought, I want to work somewhere that I can work with smart people and do cool things, and be successful, really, or at least that's how I defined it. So I went straight into a kind of graduate job. I started at Barclays, and and I spent 7 years working. So for those of you who don't know, Barclays is a huge kind of global bank, and did a number of kind of different jobs there. So I spent 4 years in London, then 3 working in Germany, and had a great time. I really enjoyed working there.
I mean, this isn't like frontline cashier type working at Barclays, right? What is this that you're doing?
Yeah, so I worked in corporate credit risk, so mostly within the investment bank and a bit of the corporate bank as well. So basically analyzing whether companies can repay money that the bank would give them. Like, I mean, that's, I suppose, the simple way of describing it. In reality, this is, M&A, leverage finance, trade finance, foreign exchange, equity, all the rest of it. But really,
like complex instruments, right?
Yeah, a lot of complex stuff, technical stuff, and yeah, it was good fun. And ultimately, we were kind of analyzing businesses, and I suppose that's where I kind of got the idea, or at least the desire for building what we're building now. Is it struck me at the time that a lot of what I was doing could be automated, or at least it felt that way, and it felt, okay, there's got to be a better way of doing some of this stuff. And so yeah, we started out trying to automate bits of my job, or at least a large part of it, because it felt like, when you're sat there at sort of 11 o'clock in the evening plugging numbers into a spreadsheet, you can't help but feel that technology can automate some of that activity. Not all of it, but certainly a lot of it. And so that's really where we got the idea for Scribe. And obviously we've moved around and done a ton of other stuff, but that's sort of where it started.
Okay. And you don't do this alone, right? You've got a co-founder. So how did that relationship begin, and how did you start this company together, or did one of you join after the other?
Yeah, so before starting the business, I spent 6 months in London looking for a co-founder, and particularly a technical co-founder, because what I wanted to build was quite deeply technical. It wasn't something I was going to code on my own. I mean, these days, potentially you could build something, but certainly what I wanted to build was quite deeply technical. So I spent 6 months looking for a technical co-founder, and I quickly realized that developers don't just turn up to networking events. It's hard to find, or at least I had the wrong approach. Anyway, I joined an
What were you
accelerator.
doing? I've got to ask. What were you doing to try and find a co-founder? Were you walking into pubs with a sign saying, "I need a technical co-founder"? What were you doing?
I was sort of, I was going to events. I was asking people if they knew any developers, if they knew anyone up for a new challenge, and and eventually, I did find a developer who was kind of up for joining. Anyway, I put his photo on a deck and I went out and tried to raise some money unsuccessfully. So I did sort of get there, but it was a very unstructured process. And I think there are probably better ways to do this. But I eventually ended up joining an accelerator called Antler, which is effectively they're a VC, but they bring together 70 or 80 people per cohort and mix of commercial, product, tech, get them all in one room, and they all want to build businesses. And that worked really, really well because I was able to meet my co-founder Emmanuel, who is academic background, so PhD in AI, postdoc, really, really technically smart. And so now we're a very credible proposition, or at least the product is, and we're investable because we have these two things. We have my kind of network industry knowledge, commercial side, and his kind of technical expertise. So we're able to get a product off the ground. So yeah, that's sort of how we came to be. And obviously through that process, they then invested in us. So they were the first investors in our business.
So, I mean, co-founder relationships, you're putting a lot of trust and faith in each other, right? But you've just met this person through Antler. How on earth did you get enough rapport between you that you both wanted to take a leap of faith together?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say it's much less about rapport and much more about like, is this something you really want to be working on for the next 4 or 5 years? And like that feels like quite a nebulous concept when you're speaking to a potential co-founder early on, because you never know what's going to happen. But I think if you broadly like the technology that you think you want to build, if you like the space and the kind of clients that you want to sell to, then the rest will sort of fall into place. But like, for example, if you are, really, really motivated by social impact, for example, and I bring you an idea that's going to help banks lend more money with a fairly limited social impact angle, then I'm not likely to be the right co-founder for you. And so I think if you align on those things, the relationship naturally will grow over time, because as you win clients, as you grow, as you have good times, as you have difficult times, that co-founder relationship should strengthen over time. And I think in many cases does. It's not the case for every business, but certainly it has been in ours.
So do you feel, I mean, this is a harsh question and feel free not to answer it, but do you feel like you guys are now going to be lifelong buddies because you've worked in this startup and this intensity together? Or do you think it is a relationship of purpose, that you're enjoying the journey that you're on, but once you finish this startup, maybe you won't even talk to each other for a few years, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question. So firstly, I don't think co-founders should be best friends. Like if
Why
it because
not? Why not? I mean, there's the ultimate trust there, right?
so if you take if I take some of my closest friends, they're very similar to me. And I think we'd bring exactly the same thing to the table in a startup. So if you're evaluating co-founder, yeah, you want to get on, but ultimately you kind of need to be different to them, at least to a degree. Otherwise the business won't be successful. Like if I took some of my closest friends and we'd start trying to build a company, I guarantee that we'd have fun, but the company wouldn't work, and I don't think we'd grow. To answer your point about us, yeah, like we spend, I spend more time with my co-founder on my team than I do with my wife, for example. And so obviously that relationship has to be really, really, really strong, and you do have to be good friends for sure. But that, I think that comes later, and I think that happens as like a natural evolution. I think if you index on like, do I get on with this person, you're probably going to ignore some of the other things that are actually going to really drive success. So, some of the technical side of things, there's no way we'd be building. Like there were things I didn't even know was possible. But like, this kind of profile, like academic background, I'm never going to come across in my day to day, particularly in my finance life. I just don't come across these kind of people. And so that's why getting outside of your like social circle can really help. Obviously you have to have that natural rapport, but I think it's important to know that you can unlock things by being very different to one another, for sure.
I mean, it sounds like Antler was a great program for you, sort of bringing you both together. And Antler's one of the top in the world, right, in terms of this kind of pre-idea, pre-team program. So you've got Demium, you've got Antler, you've got places like Entrepreneur First. What would you say is the sort of secret sauce of the program that really helped you the most?
Yeah, I think it obviously doesn't work for everybody. But
I mean,
what
there's not
these,
startups made by all of them, right? You get 70 together and you might get
of
30
course,
startups at the end of it, maybe.
yeah, absolutely. But I think what they do, number one, is they're almost like a sort of, what they do is align people who are driven and smart and get them in one place at the right time. The hardest thing about, timing is never perfect for building a startup or building a company. And I think just aligning timing and getting everyone in the same place, you only need to have one person out of that 70 people who you align with and you want to build with. And I think that's the secret sauce. I think like these programs obviously do lots of other stuff like capital and sessions and whatever, but the number one unlock is getting everyone in the same place at the same time. Obviously, like, we benefited from introductions to investors, events. There's a ton of stuff that I could wax lyrical about the value of having one of those investors on your cap table. But at its core, it's really a people thing. And so, like, I mean, this sounds a bit like a pitch for Antler. We're obviously one of the companies that have benefited from it. But like, if you have 3,000 applicants, which I think they had for ours, and you get that down to 70 with a half decent recruitment process, then like, I'm not going to speak to 1,500, 2,000 engineers to find a co-founder, but they've basically done a lot of that work for me before then getting into a room and getting us together. So that's the value to me. I think it's a very smart model.
Interesting. And then I guess they've done some investment in you when you came through the program, right? And they don't do that for everybody that comes through, do they? It's not a
No,
natural
no.
course of events. So you now have them for a little while longer in your lives, I guess. Are they an active or a passive investor at this point? Do they get involved day to day?
Day to day, no, but they're very supportive. Client introductions. I think, and again, I think this is true of any investor: is you get out what you put in.
Okay.
Like I would never expect an investor to introduce me to a new client every day if I'm not asking them to. And so I think that's something that, again, I suppose there's a wider point here around how founders make the most out of their investors. Like, you've got to update them, and you've got to um, know how to get the best from them, because they're usually well networked people. They see a lot of the market. You can leverage investors for sure, and that's certainly what we've done with Antler, and they've been really helpful. So
Nice. All right. Well, this is a Founder Friday thing, so I'm going to ask you a couple of founder-like questions. So, what has been for you the best personal highlight so far in your startup journey? What's been your biggest mistake, and what's been the biggest row you've had with your co-founder so far? Feel free to not answer any of those.
uh, biggest, what was the first one? Sorry.
Biggest highlight for you,
Highlight, yeah.
then the biggest mistake, and then the biggest row.
Highlight is that's a good question. I think highlight really is like a general feeling of growing. Like, so for the last year, like we've spent a couple of years building a product, and sort of, we could have probably moved a bit faster, but we're now in a spot where, we're getting client referrals all the time, and people are signing up and paying us, and all through referrals. That's really rewarding, because someone will be in a group and they'll be shouting about what you do and saying, "Oh, Scribe's great. I found 250K or 300K through their platform. Amazing." That impact is huge. Like, we're unlocking, like, you know, on the founder side, like, we're unlocking millions in capital for these people, and these are businesses that, might have been struggling. Like, that's, wow, like, incredible impact, really. So like, that's like a general highlight. And obviously, like, you know we have a channel on our Slack that pings every time someone signs up or we get a new paying client. And I'd be lying if I didn't say my mental health was inextricably linked to how active that channel is. But it is really rewarding just seeing that momentum, and obviously we don't take it for granted, but that's always a kind of highlight. In terms of like, um, maybe like low lights. I mean, look, we've had situations where we've struggled to keep the lights on, as most early stage businesses do, particularly early on. But what I would say is, you know, I think startups naturally lose time because they're kind of validating things. Like, we set out in day one to sell to banks, and we misunderestimated. Like, we sort of assumed someone would maybe give us a proof of concept as like 2-3 person team. The reality is, like, for what we were trying to do, really hard to do without either a chunk of capital or some trusted networks or some smaller businesses. And so I think like we then sort of shifted our focus, at least initially. We're now selling into those big banks, by the way, but it's taken us some time to get there. So, if I could rewrite it, I'd reshuffle how we prioritize things. But
I mean, that sounds like a learning point rather than a mistake. Like, what's the humdinger? Something you've absolutely screwed up in the first couple of years. Is there anything you can talk about?
Humdinger? No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, we're pretty. I don't think so, because it's kind of it's the cost of doing business. So it hasn't really stayed with me, and maybe I've kind of forgotten these things.
Oh, maybe it's good you just let it go, right? It's all right.
Yeah, possibly. I sort of don't really see it that way. And also the way that we built, like, we've never had these moments where like the platform's gone down, no one can access, everyone's screaming at us or whatever, because we're not that kind of company anyway. So it's like everything's built pretty securely, it all works, and we just don't really have those kind of moments. Unfortunately, sorry to disappoint.
No, I mean, you mentioned your background and the banking and everything. Do you think you kind of operate within a mental health banding that's pretty stable, or are you like quite a few founders where you have quite extreme type mental health balance in the day?
Yeah, I would say, like, I think your threshold like it increases over time. So like when something bad happens or something good, you're sort of less affected by these swings. So but I would say, like, yeah, I mean, having worked in that kind of environment, you're naturally a bit more resilient. So I would say, like, I'm not really impacted by these big swings, for better and worse. I think sometimes it's good to celebrate some of the things that you're doing as well, and we're more kind of consistent. I would also say that for a startup, and I don't really know this too much, but I would say as a startup, we're reasonably professional. Even though we're a small team, I would say we're quite professional. We have really good people on the team, and I think that resonates with our clients. So yeah, I suppose in terms of the ups and the downs, we're kind of a bit more, more resilient or stable, if I can put it that way.
When you say professional, would it be fair to say that it feels a bit more corporate than a lot of startups who are kind of like creative expressions? Or?
Definitely not corporate. But I would say we take our clients seriously. We take our service really seriously. We take client service really seriously. And I think like some of those things are less common than you think in start. Like for example, when people if we have customer support things, we'll be responding to them within a minute or two, which is like a level of customer service that like our clients just aren't really used to. But it's a differentiator. And it's like such a key part of growth, because if they have an amazing client experience with us, they'll have it with others. So I suppose definitely not corporate, like I'm wearing shorts, not suit. But I would say like taking things seriously and being professional, I think, is something that I think a lot of startups kind of maybe don't always operate with. But yeah, I'm not quite articulating myself well there, but hopefully it's sort of, it's just where we kind of come from and the people that we've got.
Okay. So, I mean, we're obviously going to finish the interview today and just sort of ask you what your best advice is for a first-time founder, because it's really great to see role models like you in the community being successful. And I think it's amazing when first-time founders hear from people like you, what does it take to do this? What's the advice? But before then, I was super curious, how do you take care of yourself, like mentally and physically? How do you optimize Rob for this journey? Because this is a journey, right? And it has peaks and troughs and ebbs and flows, but it doesn't stop until you've exited. So how do you look after yourself?
Before I answer that, I'm going to answer the question from before, because I don't think I did.
Oh, the argument. I thought you were skipping it, so I was letting you go.
I think the most we've argued is actually on designs of buttons in our platform. So
really?
we have a lot of creative tension around what the platform looks like, which is often about the most inane things, but we have different design eye, which neither of us are designers, neither of us have built any software really before, and so this kind of like tension, it ends up looking quite nice and it does work, but it's quite funny how we get there.
It must be blue, it must be red. I mean,
you joke. You'd be surprised. Honestly, changing the website difficult to agree on any kind of design. which
Can
is
you? I mean, it's a skill to argue with each other, right? Rather than offend each other in the argument. Is this part of the professional nature that you're bringing, that you can have a robust discussion and walk away friends? Or
I think, yeah, I think we're both adults, and we sort of realize we can have that somewhat maybe heated conversation, then just move on, leave it behind us. I would say, I wouldn't call it arguing, is probably a strong word. I would say it's like, disagreements, but we're both very, very good at like kind of agreeing and moving on. And I think that's one of these things where you have a bit of structure, and your kind of co-founders is like, there's so much that I'm not going to get involved with, and vice versa. And I think when you have these roles reasonably well defined, even for a small business, it can actually help you move faster, because if you that's where it's tricky as a sole founder. It's like, if you're a sole founder, you've hired an engineer, and when you've got things set up in the right way, you can move really quickly. I think that's certainly the case here.
okay.
But yeah, to your point around sort of, I suppose, founder, like how to manage the kind of general stress of it. Like I spend a ton of my free time playing music, for example. I go running. Like, there's a lot that I do outside of work. I still work really hard. Like, I'll do the odd few hours on the weekend, and like, I'm taking fewer holidays than I did in the past. But I'm pretty good at like doing something that takes me completely out of this kind of world. I still work very, very hard, but I think I'm able to switch off here and there, and that's sort of how I manage it. And actually, I think we operate at a good level. Look, we started in COVID, like, where it was just online, and it was like, I can't really, like, I'm the kind of person that loves to hang out with other people. I like going to events. I'm a very
You go to a
social
lot of
person.
them, right? You've been to pretty much
Yeah,
every event there is in London.
it's important for business development, but I also enjoy them. And I think, like, in COVID, that ecosystem, that world didn't exist. A ton of it was online, and like, that's where I found it way tougher. Like, we were fundraising online and trying to sell to enterprise clients online, and I found that like really tough going. And I was like, okay, I could still decompress by watching a bit of TV, but it's not the same. And so I think, like, yeah, if I compare those two environments, definitely that sort of online world, although in some cases was good, in other cases it was like definitely not good in terms of like decompressing or like doing something else.
You say you play a lot of music. You're happy to share, what kind of instrument and what sort of,
Yeah.
are you in a band, or how does this work?
Yeah, so I played trumpet in my spare time and a bit of piano, but mostly jazz, big band. We're doing a bit of folk at the moment, so I haven't posted about that on LinkedIn yet, but we've been playing some chamber jazz folk together with a good friend of mine, so that's good fun.
Amazing. Okay,
Yeah.
and you do that just for fun, or you do that as gigs? You get paid for that stuff, or?
Mostly for fun. Like, I play in a couple of bands weekly, and it's mostly for fun. Very occasionally get paid for something like a function band or something, but I usually reinvest it, into the art, or for it costs more than I earn from it, to be honest. But
Okay, so it's
good
a
fun.
joy, right? It's a joy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And does that mean your brain's wired well for languages as well? Because normally people who play multiple instruments can speak multiple languages.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I lived in Germany, so I sort of was not forced, but I did learn to speak German. So maybe there's something in that. So I can speak German. So maybe there's something that process of language learning was slightly easier.
It's supposed to be very good for stress management and for cognitive longevity as well, having those skills, and both languages and music related to that. So.
Interesting. Yeah. I often read about that sort of right, left brain stuff. So I'm guessing there's something there. Yeah. I've not thought about it too much, but
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous because I'm really rubbish at languages and really rubbish at music, so there's not much hope for me at this stage.
well, first step is believing that you can, and then the rest will follow.
Yeah, you haven't heard me sing or anything.
I imagine your Portuguese is all right by this point, though.
No, I mean, I don't starve, and I can do the formalities, but most conversational stuff reverts to English. It's I'm not good at that, and part of that is because I come and go so much. I don't have that
the full immersion.
That immersion, yeah. But like I say, I don't starve, and I've got most of my friends in Portugal that are ones that you have good relationships with, where you understand each other a lot. they obviously speak very good English. We never would have got to that level. So that it's normal for most people, particularly in the startups scene, but actually across Portugal, because it's a lot of tourism. So they speak English, French, Spanish, German, just as a natural course of affairs. And you're kind of like, wow, this is just amazing. And I've got friends who flip between those languages very quickly at a dinner table, talking in all these different ranges about quite complicated things sometimes. I think it's quite stunning, but it is not my brain that's going to do that just yet.
Fair enough.
So let's round this one out then. What's your best advice, given your wisdom and experience today, for first-time founders who are watching this and thinking, well, Rob's doing something, I quite fancy doing something like that. You know, what should they be thinking about?
So I think probably the most simple answer to this is, to just start, like just test things, just put yourself out there, talk about what you're doing. I think and this is as true in life, is like no one really cares about you. Like if you like,
I care about you, Rob. Come on.
like no one's really like we care about ourselves, obviously, but like we're so worried that we put something out there. We're worried about what people are going to think. And actually, like, that's the key to building anything, is just getting your idea out there and talking about it, or talking to people. You don't necessarily have to put it always on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, whatever it is, but like just getting yourself out there and like just doing it. Like there's no replacement. You could watch, listen to 1,000 podcasts, but it will not replace what you learn from actually doing it. And what you find, I think, is like this world of it. Are you going to be advice, or are you going to do? And I think like just by doing, you'll learn way more, and that really is the best place to start. And first time founders classically hold them back from this immensely, and it holds their business back as well, because they're not speaking to their potential clients, they're not putting themselves out there, they're not bringing anything into being. And these days, with the cost of software falling to zero, it's never been easier to start a business. I think there's so much you can do to iterate, to charge people for what you're providing. It's never been easier. So I think my advice would be to kind of just get out there and kind of just do it, and you'll figure out pretty quickly whether or not building a company is for you, because a lot of people it's not. I think it's romanticized quite heavily, of like, this is like a cool thing to do, but it is immensely difficult. We work with hundreds of founders, and not one of those founders has had an easy ride. And I think like it's important to iterate that like not everyone should be building a company, even if it kind of sounds like a cool idea. So yeah, that would be what I would suggest. Just kind of get out there.
I mean, I'm fully supportive of that. And even when I'm teaching this stuff on the masters, I give a very similar bit of feedback. But I just wondered, if I bring something back from what you said earlier about being a very professional team, a lot of the resistance I get when I'm teaching this to more mature students on the masters is it doesn't feel very professional to just get out there and try this flaky, half-baked idea with people. Like, how do you reconcile those two things together?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the issue there, and obviously, you're speaking to master's students now, the fact that they're doing a master's in business rather than starting a business tells you a lot about the psychology of how people want to de-risk their careers or their next steps. So they're already in that group of people. Same for MBA students and things like this. But there's absolutely a way to do it, and I think like it doesn't necessarily have to be like getting out there and talking about it, but I think the average individual resonates much more with you trying to do something than you'd think. Like like when I put my stuff out there, like, okay, like I'll see my friends after work, and I'll catch up with them in the pub, and they'll say like initially they're just like, oh god, like really big on the LinkedIn, but the average individual has a deep respect for for what you're doing. And so putting yourself out there, asking a few questions, trying it out, and if it doesn't work, it's fine. I think you've obviously got to be careful of your tone, and you don't want to just go swearing on LinkedIn about if you're trying to sell into banks, for example. There's things you need to be aware of, but on the whole, I would say the average individual can take a lot more risks with this stuff. And I think the world's changing so quickly as well that those people that are sort of in the, like, you almost stand more to lose by doing the conventional thing, I think. So you stand nothing to lose by putting yourself out there and trying to do something new. And so, if you're worried, then if you're worried about putting something out there, then maybe building a company isn't for you. And that's okay as well.
Nice.
So it's a bit of a scattered answer, but yeah,
No.
that's probably how I'd respond to it.
Founder Friday is all about that kind of stream of consciousness. It's not supposed to be canned or anything like that. It's all good. And I just wanted to close out by saying thank you. Thank you for spending time today to kind of share more of your story. Thank you for bringing a product that's helping Canopy members to raise money. We really appreciate that. And you guys have solved a problem that we didn't know how to solve, like getting this access to angel investment, making it more of a systematic process that can actually be driven rather than this artisanal thing that was kind of curating all these individual bits of money. It's really, really helpful. But thank you for just being such a gent. You've been an amazing contributor in the demo nights and supportive of other founders, and just really just want to say thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much for having me, and yeah, hopefully some of this resonates with people, and if it doesn't, then that's cool too.
Thanks, Rob.